going to ask one question here, but be thinking of questions. I'm definitely going to open it up to everybody else. One of the things I was thinking as I was watching this is how you conceptualized everything from the beginning. How much did you have it charted out? Okay, these were the things that I wanted to try to pick up, or how much does it just the movie kind of create itself as you met people along the way?
I think it was more like, when you go into the border, you could spend years there making a movie. So I had only a limited budget that I had raised. So I had to plan ahead and just kind of visualize where I would go and what situations I wanted to put myself in. I mean, some of those characters I couldn't have reached if I didn't plan, but really it was just like, I want to put myself in that situation. I want to talk to this person and see where it takes me. And it was just, trying to get really basic questions out there, and everybody just kind of gave me their own answer. And so the film started percolating through this road trip that we took for 4 weeks. Myself, the cameraman, and the sound man. It was just 3 people. Go ahead.
You go next. Can you tell us about the shots that were at the end, accompanying the credits, and that are also edited throughout the film, where the subject is sort of being still, either looking at the camera or holding something? Did you always intend to cut them into the film? Why did you take them? Why did you include them?
We just wanted portraits because we bonded with our characters. Even, some characters we met for a whole day, some characters we met for a couple minutes, like the guy who does heroin. That was just a few minutes. But it was so intense that we kind of had a connection. It was our way of like keeping a log. And so at the end, I think it was a good way to kind of summarize the faces of the people that we met, and kind of like the different faces of the universe itself, of this border, and just kind of give you an idea of like the human constellation that we can find there.
You show us a lot of different pieces of this world. I mean, all over the place. Those are questions what you're going to show us next. But I assume you shot even more footage, and I wonder how you chose to put what you put in this film, or was that everything you shot?
I mean, there were, just there's a balance to the film. It kind of takes you one way, and then it just, it builds an idea, and then it destroys it, it goes somewhere else, builds another idea. So there were things that just would take us so far out, like in the mental health, the grassroots mental health hospital that this man started. We found a guy from Somalia there, and he claimed that he wasn't Somali. He claimed that he was from Kazakhstan. And so he was like completely nuts, and he would get beat up every night. And so he gave us all these crazy, really bizarre stories. And it would have been like a good short film of him, but just going that far out there. So that's why there's also voiceover, because I want to engage with a conversation and just kind of navigate through this place. It's not like willy-nilly. There's like a navigation. And it took a long time actually to shuffle the pieces together. We had a cut of the film within a month, but then shuffling all the pieces together was like pretty hard. It took like a year.
I was really impressed that you went like all the way. You didn't just like touch on stuff, you went all the way in, which is, I think, unlike many documentaries. And I guess I was also impressed that the people that you were interviewing gave you that much access to their worlds. And I mean, it sounds like you did a lot of pre-production, but I'm wondering how much of that, being there when a dog dies, being there when, inside of that the mental institution, how much of that came from planning, and how much of that came from you being a charismatic person who said,
I think it came more from my job as an interpreter. I'm actually a Spanish interpreter in Central California, and so like we work in an emergency room in like one of the poorest parts of California. Like you meet some crazy people, and so I kind of met my characters before in a way. I met their cousins or family members of the same experience. You know what I mean? I've met people who have been in the hospital, OD'd and stuff like that. So it was just a matter of just like giving them a lot of respect. Just and you don't even have to feel pity for people. You just have to like just respect what they're doing and just not judge them. Like when we were trying to convince that guy to let us shoot where all these guys do heroin, like it was just, man, like I think, people can see this, it's a good idea, like, I respect what you're doing and everything. It was just, he didn't feel judged, I think. And I picked, a sound guy and a camera guy that weren't like, they didn't have these moral hangups, and it's, it could have been a movie where like, it makes us all feel validated about the border and one way or another makes us feel comfortable about it, but I think that's kind of not what it is, so you just have to take it for what it is, kind of like the murder that we found. It was really funny because we went there and the thing that everybody wants to show you in Juarez is murders, like all the journalists that hang out with you and like they're friendly to foreigners that come in and like they all want to help you, and then all of a sudden the murders stopped and it was like in the paper like, oh wow, this is like the third day in like 6 years we haven't had murders. It's really weird. People were like, what's wrong, like why aren't there murders? And the journalists would say things like, don't worry, business will pick up, things are going to get good again, and they didn't. And we ended up getting just the guy that everybody was making fun of the body when they found it. They were just commenting on how this was a waste of time to pick up this body that was killed for nothing. It wasn't anything sensational or anything crazy. And so you never know what you're going to get. You just kind of have to like take it as it comes, and let the border push you back a little bit.
My question was about the voiceover, because I think like there was this poetic text that was really important because you're showing like as I think you mentioned, like these very different fragments of this world, and the text was very important in like connecting these pieces together. And I was wondering like when did you get to the result of like including the voiceover, and what was the process of writing the text for you?
At first, when I had my first cut, I didn't have a voiceover, and it was just like a meditative film. And then I felt I had to kind of jump in there and just take responsibility for what I was showing, and maybe have like the opportunity for people to disagree with me. And so I think the voiceover is kind of flawed in a way, like on purpose. It just kind of it's just kind of observations that are not definitive. They're just kind of very personal, and so it took a while. It took like 4 or 5 months just writing it and just cutting it down and taking out facts. That's another thing. The movie never tells you what city you're in. Doesn't never tell you like this is Mexico, this is the United States, this is California, this is Arizona, and that's all like part of it. Like how do you write a voiceover without giving people all that information? Because voiceover is supposed to give us information. It's supposed to be like an authority. And I'm just another traveler, and this is what I saw. And I want the film kind of to feel like a dream. Maybe like a week or 2 weeks from now, you'll remember something. Maybe some scenes more than others, right? But just kind of like go for the emotions. And so I felt that without the voiceover, I would be kind of hiding like the fact that I made this film, and that you can disagree with it, or you can take it however you want. There's something in the back.
Obviously, the section with the euthanasia of the animals is difficult. I'm just wondering why you did that, and was that some kind of metaphor, or how did that evolve for you?
Are you a dog owner or a pet owner?
Yes, I love animals. It was very hard to watch.
Did you feel that scene was just pointless for you?
Just really hard, and it's reality. It's what happens in our country, here in the U.S. And I've also done traveling in other countries, and I see how animals are treated. And it just seemed like it was a metaphor for possibly how we treat immigrants.
Well, and
I don't know
how we treat immigrants, or how we treat problems, right? Because we throw money, or we throw like policies. And I mean, even right now, the Justice Department is reviewing their drug war policy because they realize we've devastated cities like Baltimore, Detroit, Chicago, LA. We've sent people to prison for possession. We have a 3 strikes law in California. So it's kind of like this way that we have of solving problems that doesn't really solve problems. And I mean, in that sad way, those dogs were gonna die anyway, right? Like, and at least the film is witness to that. And instead of me showing you a bunch of talking heads from police officers and, you know, all these people talking about how pointless it is, then you just have this very simple metaphor of the dogs, and we all feel for the dogs because we know they didn't do anything; they were just trying to live. And the owners who didn't spay them, who, you know, or whatever, they spay dogs, right? They neuter them. They, you know, they're not getting punished at all. They just don't go and pick them up. So it's, you know, I think it's a very good metaphor for what happens on the border.
Thank you.
What was the setting of the buildings at the end, the new abandoned new construction?
The abandoned new constructions were in Morocco. Yeah, I went to Morocco because I had the crazy idea of like mixing a few interviews at the end. And I did shoot interviews in Morocco actually, but then we ended up just going with the scenery. And we were really lucky because they were getting all these storms, so there's all these clouds. It's really green. It's kind of the opposite of the desert, you know, so it could be the future. And the buildings look very new because they are. They're all the companies from Spain and Portugal that went bankrupt are going to North Africa and, you know, doing the same thing that caused the housing crisis in Europe. They're doing it to Morocco and other countries up there. So, you know, it was an interesting kind of like idea, and I think it worked out as images. It just kind of takes you out of the border and lets you have a different reflection instead of just ending it at the border and just giving it like this punch that could go a little bit further.
What was your thinking, your ideas about the scene with the fellow who was collecting trash to obscure the trail?
You know what? That was the very first interview that we did, and the sound man, he lives in TJ, and so he's very like pro-migrant, and he loved that guy. He got really into it because you can't not respect the work that he puts into it. Like, he's walking the walk, right? He's out there doing it, and they call him Gadget Dan, and the other Minutemen make fun of him. They call him crazy. Like, they just sit around drinking beer with guns, and he goes out there like picking up trash. And you know, like, even when I've screened it in Mexico, people have said, you know, like, some people talk about him as a racist, and then it's happened several times that somebody says, wait a minute, that guy's not just a racist, he called us out on our own, you know, our own failures in our country. So he has some good and bad. I've had that happen in Q&As, where Mexicans, Mexico itself, say that, you know, they recognize he's got a point. I mean, he's kind of out there, but sometimes the people that are out there in our society are pointing things out for us that we kind of don't want to see sometimes. You know, we had a great time with him. There's actually a sandwich named after the Minutemen where he's working. So we went and we all had a Minuteman sandwich.
Could you speak to your music choices, the company music, and it was very startling at times, and I'd like to hear a little more about that.
Yeah, you know, for a while we started using classical music because it was so composed, and then I started thinking of there's this movie called Ron by Akira Kurosawa, and he uses all this like atmospheric music by this famous Japanese composer. And then I found this music from this guy who was in a concentration camp, this French composer called Messiaen. And it turned out that even though he's like kind of obscure, his music is like really expensive. So yeah, so I got this guy in Mexico City who programs for the classical radio station in Mexico City. He's the lead programmer, and you know, he loved imitating these two composers. And I think it works because it keeps you in the dream. It keeps you in this surreal space. It adds to blurring the lines, all the sounds, the half sounds, and the kind of the wave feeling in the music.
Two more questions. I thought it was very beautifully written.
Thank you.
wonderful writer. The two men at the border who were 22 days into their journey. How did you meet up with them at that juncture of their journey? And then where are they now?
Well, that's one of the advantages of like, spending all your money on your movie because you can do whatever the hell you want. And I only had 3 people and they all, were in agreement. So we did a casting. We casted for undocumented migrants. We like went to a breakfast place and we sat through this mass that they make them listen to, this really long service, and then we were scoping out who we were going to connect with. We started talking to different people, and these guys were just really legit. They weren't like involved with a cartel. They weren't like gonna rob us. They were just simple guys who were just trying to make it. And actually, what they were trying to do was they were trying to sneak into the United States without paying anybody. So like, they were gonna have to watch their ass from both sides because they didn't want to pay the smugglers and they didn't want to get caught. And so we took them out there and they did their thing. I mean, like that part where they climbed, that's all them. Like I was just like keep shooting, and then when he got to the top, we started screaming like that he needs to come down because we're gonna get in trouble. And sure enough, the helicopter and the car and everybody came after. So I don't know where they are now. I mean, that's kind of the reality of that. Like what could I have done for them? I would have to give them like thousands of dollars so they could go back to their place of origin. And what if they just leave the money there and come back? So what we did do for them was give them some Nalgene's so it won't break, because the plastic bottles they take in the sun and break. And then we gave them some survival food, like things like peanut butter and stuff like that. But it's hard because, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but you're looking at the two of them, you're kind of comparing, like, you kind of think in your mind, like, who's going to make it, who's not, right? And the older man, I mean, I don't know if he could climb that wall like that, right? So we took him back into town, and it was just a mutual agreement. It was pretty, we felt pretty good about it, and I think they thought it was good that someone actually cared about what they were doing and didn't make them, like, pretend to be super Christian or anything like that.
Pretend to be super Christian or anything like that.
Could you tell us a little bit more about that scene where you have the boys rattling off the catalog of every kind of weaponry imaginable, how you came across them and how it was set up for that little bit to happen?
Well, what did you think about that?
Actually, it reminded me of a film I saw in Seattle a couple months ago about a group of kids, maybe 8 or so years older than they, who were in a gang attack in North Africa, and it was a big gang war there. I flashed forward in my mind to a similar setting. I figured they were in somewhere like Juarez or some other really horrible hotspot where they listened to the narco songs and all this sort of stuff.
Well, I think it's actually kind of funny because, it comes off like the kids come off really funny and cute, and then it's kind of disturbing. And I met them outside of a murder kidnapping in Juarez, and they couldn't, nobody could go in and to see the body or anything. So everybody was hanging out outside, and these kids, their parents were wherever, and like, so they start talking about guns, and I just asked them to get in front of the camera, but it turned out that they were talking about their favorite video game, Grand Theft Auto. But it's funny because if you take out the context, it's just like, oh my God, like this is so funny because these guys are like already soldiers, right? They're already ready to go to war, and that's kind of the thing about the border. It's like you see it first impression and second impression and third, and everything changes. We see kids all the time. We see kids in the cemetery. We see kids rattling off guns. We see a baby being held, like, and it's always changing. Like the kids are, like you can't really define what they're up to, what's going to happen to them, and it's just like human beings. Like we can give our kids everything, and then they still turn out to be whatever they're going to be, right? So it's kind of part of the film. I think it's to have these kids there and constantly popping up and changing your expectations.
So before we close out here, later in the week we're going to play another film to you. And if you could just say a quick word about that, because
Okay, so I'm sorry I won't be around, but that's actually the first U.S. screening of that film. And it's called Memories of the Future, and it's kind of like a film school, kind of like stubborn, very self-centered film. But it's cool because I made it living in my car with a friend from college, and we drove around Mexico for like 4 months in a Dodge Caravan, and we made this crazy film. And actually, like, I just talked to him for the first time in 4 years because the film was so crazy that our friendship just kind of ended, you know. And you know, it's just kind of like this whole thing. You take a camera and you just make a film, and you know, it's just kind of like that film. There's a lot of good things about it because it brought me to the border and it led me to think about making this film. And also, it taught me all the things you don't do. You know, like how you don't use a camera, like how you don't ruin a scene, or how you don't rush things, or how you don't edit everything yourself. Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's an interesting film. I think you'll see some pieces of Mexico. And there's another Minuteman there too. That one is like the opposite of this one. The one in Memories of the Future has a patch and a gun, an eye patch, and a gun. And he's totally crazy pirate Minuteman. And so it's a different film, but they're kind of like siblings. You know, this is like the refined, more distilled, more like thought out version. Yeah. Yeah. So please watch it and send me a message on Facebook or something. So please watch it.
thank you all for coming out, and thank you so much for presenting the film.
Thank you.